Today is the first day of this June-July 1985 7-day retreat. At first there's an announcement. As you come down the driveway around the curve, before entering the wooded part, to your left, there's a strip of unworked dirt yet, and if you pass through that, there's an open field, and to your right there's a little grove which has been cleared out for people to sit in. It's the only cleared out shady grove that we have so far, as far as I'm aware of. So please don't park a car in there for camping. There are many other places where to put a car. If a car was there, then people wouldn't sit in there, and it was cleared out for that purpose. You can take a chair down there or a mat. There's also one small bench. In sitting down for a talk, please find the most comfortable position for back and legs that you have experimented with. Using a chair, or there's this chair that I sometimes sit on, it's in the corner right now, that is available for someone to sit on. Benches or cushions, so that you have a minimum of discomfort while listening. If there's a lot of pain while listening, pain in the knees, in the back or shoulders, then it's very difficult to listen openly at the same time. The mind is drawn to the pain. Can even be distorted by it. If you find that whatever comfortable position you started out in, it becomes uncomfortable, then to change it. And if possible, to do so very quietly, so one does not disturb the people sitting around one. Some sounds are inevitable, but then there are all these extra sounds that we make when there's no attention. Likewise, if one sits next to a person who changes the posture during a talk, maybe not once but twice or more, can one listen to that in all openness without taking a position? The moment one becomes annoyed or irritated, then that results in more inner noise than the actual sound of the change of the posture. It's very possible. One has to observe all this for oneself. One thing I did forget to talk about last night was sleep. We have divided day and night is more the sleeping time, day is the working or waking time. The biological rhythm has developed with that. But one need not assume or cannot assume that the same rhythm takes place during a retreat. One doesn't know. One may not even know what one's natural rhythm is during the day, because one forces patterns upon oneself. society does too. It has ideas of how many hours of sleep one needs, and that may be true for certain conditions and may not be true for others. If one is very tired, whether it's day or night, and the round is over, there's nothing wrong with taking a rest, going to sleep if one can. But one may find that as one lies down, one isn't sleepy at all. There's anything but sleepiness. The mind goes, or there's lots of energy. So then, why lie in bed when one is energetic or cannot sleep? But it's up to each one. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. So when one wakes up in the middle of the night and one is wide awake, this place is always open for sitting, or one can take a walk. We have almost a full moon, so there's no lighting problem on the road to walk fast or slowly, or to sit, or to lie in bed awake and see if the mind can slow down in quiet, motionless attention. There's nothing shameful about sleeping, or nothing heroic about waking. I have so many ideas about this through our reading and hearing and talking with others, having been conditioned oneself. Can one drop all that, throw it out, and start freshly? So one is not bound by what one thinks the time is and what that time imposes upon one by habit. If one is sleepy during a round, can one abstain from calling it fatigue or sleepiness or drowsiness? Put the word away and wonder or question right into this state without knowing what it really is, and one doesn't. That's the truth. The word sleepiness is not the state in which one finds oneself, but it brings a host of reactions, habitual reactions. I shouldn't be sleepy, or I have a right to be sleepy, or what can I do? The imagination going of having a nice soft bed, warm sleeping bag. But if one wonders intensely about one's changing states of body-mind, because one needs to find out and understand oneself, not just superficially but deeply from moment to moment, then that too is something to question. To be that without a separation from it through word and reaction, not knowing what to do about it. That's not important. That's an element of separation, doing something about our condition. Not knowing what to do about it and just being that. In that there is no division. One may find in really questioning into a state of tiredness or drowsiness that the drowsiness dissipates. It was rather a resistance to questioning, to attending. Let it show itself, reveal itself. In the presence of an awareness that does not choose. I'm going to attend to this, but not to that. This is good and that is bad. I was also going to say a few words about listening to a talk as this. There are people here who have never been to a talk, and it doesn't hurt to hear it anew, not to listen to a talk from memory, from what one already knows. Some people tell me, I've heard hundreds of your talks. Implication being becomes wearing after a while. If I remembered all the talks I had given, it would be very wearing on me too. But in talking, I don't remember what I said. That's why it's possible to talk freshly. Maybe it doesn't sound freshly. But how does one listen? Does one listen with the memory of the last talk that was on this subject? Then one is not listening completely. One is listening from a very narrow space, the space of memory. And associated with that is judgment, comparison. She said that better, or somebody else said that better at another time. Then the mind is occupied in itself, mentally, and not open to listening. Usually the things that are talked about are things that go on in the human mind, in the human body-mind, not in mine specifically or yours particularly, but in the human mind generally. And maybe what is said can be observed, seen directly in oneself, to be so or not to be so. Then it's not a matter of listening to somebody who one may take for an expert or an authority, but to see for oneself what goes on. And only then is there any value and worth in giving talks. There's no worth in giving a talk and that being repeated without understanding. For oneself, here, directly, immediately, what the words pertain to, are pointing at. Every once in a while, someone will say, I think you're trying to influence people. It may sound this way, but why should I want to influence anyone? That is dreadful. It's harmful, and not at all the essence of this work. The essence of this work is to see for oneself, so one need not be influenced by anybody. So is what one hears an influence or a challenge, an invitation to look whether this is actually so? To be seen in oneself and in others. We are not separate and different from each other. But if we only look at other people, that's a one-sided picture. So much easier to see things, envy, greed, or jealousy or violence in another person, and to react to that. And it's so hard to see it in oneself, so painful. To avoid that pain, we develop quite a sensitivity to see it in other people. But other people are fundamentally no other from ourselves. So can one always begin with oneself, particularly if one is irritated or upset over someone else, to look also within, whether there is not something that is deeply resonating, that's there too, beckoning to be listened to be seen, to be unearthed and shed light on in oneself. If that happens, it's no longer painful, it's a relief to see the human mind in operation in oneself. One does not have to point accusing fingers at others. One can understand others, not that one whitewashes what one sees around one, but one understands it because one can also look within and see the root of it all. Which is, in most cases, the thought, idea, and feeling and image of self. Me, mine, myself. This is what is going to be the remaining topic of this talk this morning, to look at this thing called self, the self. We have been trained, educated, conditioned to think in terms of self since before we can remember. And it is one of the strongest convictions that we carry around with ourselves, that there is in fact a self, a me. It's so palpable, so solid, so convincing. Because the thought of me, with all its memories, all its past experiences, is also linked up with all of our feelings, our organismic and muscular feelings, the emotions, sensations. Sitting here right now, this instant, is there the feeling there's more than this body here? As me, I am sitting here. Maybe the feeling of I am sitting here with all that's associated with that, and we'll go into that later, is so strong that there's not even a feeling of the physical presence. Often also through education, early childhood education, later education, religious education, the way we were brought up, punished, rewarded, the body has become quite dull. Sometimes people tell me it's only slowly I begin to feel that I even have a body. It becomes so numb, so dull. So in sitting, there's the breathing, the sound, which we associate with hearing. There's a feeling of warmth or coldness, draft maybe. breath of air striking the skin. Maybe some pain in the knees and back, or just the feeling of some tension over the knees and in the hips. The heart is beating. Can one feel that? Pounding of the heart. And the breath there. The hands wherever they are, the feeling of hands together or hands on the knees. Maybe there's some tension in the shoulders and neck. Face, is there tension in the face, around the mouth or eyes? These are all physical sensations. Part of this here, sitting here, this body, we want to call it that way. It's the fewer names we have to give, the better, but we have to communicate and be clear about what we're talking about. That sits here and there and there and there. And that's quite simple. Because you can say, if I look straight ahead, I look out of the window, I see people, many people in front of me, whereas if you look straight ahead, you see this wall and people who are sitting against this wall. Of course, different things are seen from different positions. If I move over there and you move here, we will see the different things. We have exchanged position. That is so for everyone. Wherever one occupies space, one occupies that particular space and no other. And sees from that space whatever is visible. That holds so for every human being, whatever space he or she occupies. It does not make for a difference, for a fundamental difference. Even though if one person grows up in Russia and another person grows up in Germany, another one in America or in South America, there will have been different conditionings, different climates and foods, cultural habits. But just to have grown up in a different place and therefore be differently conditioned and habituated does not make for a fundamental difference among you and me, us and them, if we use those words very tentatively. What is also universal for all human beings, or almost all human beings, is this feeling of I, me, I'm sitting here, not just what was just described, but I'm sitting here. There's more than physical organism, which is quite true. There are millions of thoughts, remembrances, projections, fantasies, ideas, opinions, beliefs, superstitions. It is so for each human being. It is also so for each human being that this bundle, this accumulation of opinions, ideas, beliefs, past experiences, memories, is felt as being me, the essence of me, I, the self. One is so strongly identified with one's ideas and opinions that one is those ideas and opinions, until one starts questioning them. But leaving opinions and ideas aside for the moment, if you think and wonder who you are, what you are, what am I? What comes to mind if you ask this question? Is there an image of oneself? The way one sees oneself, one has looked into a mirror many times. That's me. And that image is now deposited, it is stored in the brain. And that one calls me. And it's not only one image, but it is multitudes of images depending on the situation one is in. One acts differently in one social setting than in another. At home, differently than at work or in a bar with friends. Isn't there always imagery about what one is, how one wants to be seen by the other people, wants to impress other people, wants to be treated? Does one see that these are images stored in the mind and readily available when the situation arises, particularly when somebody does not treat one the way one expects to be treated? Then the image gets hurt, it aches, it hits back, it retaliates. And if one thinks back, one may think back through one's life, how one was a year ago, or maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when one was in one's 20s or teens, or maybe as a child. Aren't these all images that one refers to as, this was me then, this was me through the course of time? All pictures stored in the brain. And right now, if you asked yourself, who is looking at those pictures? How I was as a little child, what I still remember from then. Maybe I only remember really a picture in the photo album. Or how I was a year ago. Maybe a hurt that one hasn't forgotten, or a pleasure that one still clings to the picture of that. Who's looking at that this instant? Is the immediate response, I'm looking at it? There also being immediately the idea that there is me looking at me? All of it ideas and thoughts, images. Can that be seen? Going back to the physical body, isn't there the feeling, it is my body? An identification of a me with his or her body, which takes place in thought. There's nothing factual about that. It's a thought. I have this body. The body is a reality, is a fact. And feelings, sensations of the body are also factual. But I have those sensations as something extra. It posits someone who has that. And with that, a division. A division between a sensation, let's say a pain, and someone who endures that pain, which is a purely fictitious separation which the brain is capable of producing. Projecting an I, separating an I from the process of sensing. I am sensing, I am feeling. And then a further separation, I do not like that feeling. I must do something about it, I must fight it or overcome it, subdue it or endure it. You may say at this moment, wait a minute, not liking a pain, isn't that a very natural instinct? To withdraw from heat, from fire, or avoid pain? Of course it is. When one puts one's hand on a red hot or hot stove, one withdraws the hand immediately. At that moment there wasn't any thought, I must avoid pain. No, it's a immediate reaction. Later on one may say, how dumb of me to have put my hand on the stove. That's thought. And with it go recriminations and intentions to later on be more careful. All stored in the brain. Coming back to the me that suffers the pain, the many ways in which a pain can be responded to. One would be just there being that, as factual as it is, doing about it what can or need to be done, if it's a gashing wound to get stitches. It's factual, it heals better when it is stitched. People disagree whether it's factual, put some antibiotics on it. One may do the one medicine or another medicine. But all of this does not need to involve the sufferer. The sufferer comes in when one reflects that I am enduring this pain, and then comes fear about it, which is imagining it could get worse, not get better. This may remind one of a pain endured in the past which was very bad, took very long, and this memory is now projected in connection with a new wound into the future, producing fear, upset, whatever. All of them, all of this being thought processes linked up with feelings and sensations throughout the body. And in the middle of these thought processes is me suffering the pain. Further thought processes are feeling sorry for oneself, seeing oneself as a sufferer and then feeling sorry for oneself. I think we are all very familiar with this. It is a separation within a separation. The me as a sufferer is already a separation from the factual occurrence of pain. A separation insofar as one is not really able to feel completely, to be there totally present, because the me separates and brings up all these thoughts. It may last, it may not get better. We just went through this. So that takes away from being completely with what is going on, and rather creating a thought process about it, which creates or invokes anxiety and so forth. Because the anxiety also creates feelings within the body, and one doesn't like those, so more conflicts are set up with what is going on physically. And then on top of it all, feeling sorry for oneself as a victim of all of this. Does one see how separation in thought builds and builds more and more complex edifices? And then comes the thought, how can I be free from all this bondage of thought and sorrow and suffering? Is it a pure question? Meaning, realizing that one has to look how the bondage is created in the first place, one has to attend, one needs to understand what's going on? Or does the me want something new? The idea of being a liberated me, an enlightened self, and therefore free from bondage. More thought process on top of old ones. Or does one realize the utter necessity to find out about oneself? Not in order to achieve some kind of an imagined, thought-produced or memory-recorded state, but in order to see what are the actual facts of myself. Facts and fancy. Which is arduous because we cling to our fancy, because it allows us to disregard the facts, which are often painful or disillusioning to observe. Fact that one is envious of others, for instance. It's much harder to observe and to follow in motion as it operates than to nurture an ideal image of oneself as being generous, giving, loving, altruistic. We are tremendously attached to the images we have of ourselves. It can be observed firsthand when they are rattled, when someone tackles them or doesn't regard them, or hurts or offends them or slights them. And it's almost as though the world comes to an end when it's so upset, so confused, or feels when it's falling apart. What is falling apart are images. So what is one without any image? Without any opinion? We mentioned opinions in the beginning. We are identified with our opinions, with our knowledge, what we have learned and crammed for in school. Some of it, most of it goes again, one forgets, but some of it stays, and we're usually proud of what we know. People regard us respectfully when we are knowledgeable. Or when we have ready opinions, people may listen to us or fight us. We are very identified with our body of opinions and knowledge and beliefs. Also they are feeling that, like the body, these are my own, these are my opinions. We make such statements, I have a right to my opinions. Or this is my knowledge, this is my belief, no one can take my belief from me. But why do we say that these are mine? Leaving alone for the moment whether there is such a thing as an owner. Because how did they come upon us? How did the opinions and beliefs and knowledge come upon us? We got them from others. Or maybe reformulated what was already there. Opinions and beliefs and knowledge has come to us since it's been showered upon us like a all-penetrating rain since we were little. Little children pick up their parents' opinions almost from day one. If the relationship is cordial with the parents, one will cherish one's parents' opinions and beliefs. If the relationship is antagonistic, one will react against one's parents' opinions and adopt opposite ones. To feel free from parents' opinions, but it's not freedom. One just takes over somebody else's. What in our whole panorama of ideas, thoughts, opinions, knowledge, beliefs, what of that could one honestly call one's own? It's sort of a common goods, isn't it? That one dips into just like everybody else. May be painful to acknowledge if one is very identified with it, but it can be a tremendous relief to realize that one owns nothing. And then the further question, the deeper question, who is that owner? That me who thinks he or she has these opinions? If you look at it instantly, you see that is also an idea. It's a word. I have opinions. What is that I? Does it refer to the fact that it emanates from this brain here at this moment? Or is there this conviction that there is someone inside who who owns, who has, who is somebody, who will be somebody in the future. All of which is, on the one hand, what we feel is substantial about us, what we're proud of, or what we chafe under, what we suffer from. What we argue about, disagree about, divide ourselves from each other about, go to war about. My belief or my ideology versus your belief or your ideology is worth fighting for and killing each other for, as long as we're both identified with that. To the point of giving one's life for it. And why is there this strong identification with belief or ideology or knowledge? This is me, feeling that this is oneself, which one needs to defend like one has to defend one's physical body to survive. What is one without one's opinions and beliefs and prejudices and accumulated knowledge? What is one without all of that? It is the me, it is the very essence of the me. Which, because it is a fiction, a thought construct, a memory, accumulated memories, is inherently insufficient, partial, cut off from the whole. Vulnerable. Always longing for something to fill the gap, to fill the inner emptiness. The instant one says I or me, there is a separation. One has to see that clearly. A separation in thought from what is not I and what is not me. And with that comes anxiety, feeling of inadequacy, which one then needs to compensate for. By attaching to opinions and beliefs and ideologies. Or roles. Even the role of a sufferer, of a victim, can be a welcome role to be somebody, something worth living for. And it all happens in thought, albeit thought being linked up with all our physical sensations and bodily movements. in listening to is that a thought? Or the sound of bodies moving on cushions? Listening. Is that thought? Is there a me that's listening? I am listening to that, we say. But what is that I that's listening? Thoughts about the moving, thoughts about the birds. Then there's no listening. Then the listening is overgrown with thoughts. The thoughts become important, the judgment becomes important, and the sound recedes. Is it possible to listen without the me? And to see when the me comes in and what it actually is? What it actually is, not what one thinks it is, but what it actually is seen to be. We will end here for today.